If you solve a problem for 5 people, you have friends. Solve for 1 million, you're wealthy. Solve for 1 billion, you change history. That's what's exciting here. And if you think this is crazy, every 48 hours, there's a new self-made billionaire. Think about it. What did you do this past weekend? Bet you didn't make 1 billion. So how do you do it?
Hi guys, welcome to the show where we learn from the people who have followed their passion to achieve great success and have impacted many lives. If you're new here, then please do consider subscribing to this channel. This episode is being recorded in association with Let's Localize, an organization with a mission to foster micro contributions from communities and businesses to support schools for their need of time, skills, and money. I'm your host Ajay Mathur, and my guest today is a serial entrepreneur, a globally sought after speaker, and an author of a best-selling book. He's widely known as a leading expert in disruption and innovation. He has built and sold many multi-million-dollar companies and has been an independent chairman of Deloitte, a CEO of a Nasdaq-listed company, and has held many senior positions in EMI, Sony, and Universal Studio. He has raised hundreds of millions of dollars for the startups, and he advises not just the entrepreneurs and CEOs and governments, but he has also helped the president and Pope to orchestrate positive change. He regularly writes for the Wall Street Journal and appears very frequently on CNBC, CNN, MSNBC, just to name a few. I am so super excited to welcome the best-selling author of the book Disrupt You, that has been translated into 14 different languages, Jay Samit. Jay, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Let's start with your own journey. You were dyslexic and now you have propelled, oh, you still are. You have propelled yourself to such a glorious, successful career. I just wanted to know, what did you do because dyslexia previously was understood as a learning disability, if I'm not wrong.
Oxford did a study, and 1 out of 3 British CEOs are dyslexic. So it's actually a superpower, not a negative thing. And so back in elementary school, I didn't want kids to make fun of my reading skill. So whenever there was a group project, I'd raise my hand to be in charge, and I'd delegate everything to those people that could do this and that, which is great practice for being a CEO. Because all that an entrepreneur does is need 2 things to become a millionaire or a billionaire: insight and perseverance. Everything else can be hired. Every student watching me right this second has written the same amount of code or more than Steve Jobs, who built a $1 trillion company. Steve wasn't a programmer. Bill Gates built an empire by licensing somebody else's code. So anything can be hired. Insight can be taught, and perseverance comes from your gut. So my story, I had 2 sons very young. I wanted them to have a good life, and there's no better motivation than baby needs shoes. So I refused to quit, and I continued to learn. And what I realized is that there was a pattern. I woke up and grew up no different than people here. My dad was a public school teacher. Mom was a homemaker. I didn't know what a millionaire was. I didn't know what a billionaire was. And you wake up one day and dozens of friends have become billionaires. We're not smarter than anybody else. We're not better looking. We didn't come from connections. But we figured out how the world works differently. And that cell phone that every one of you has connects you to 6 billion people. You only have to be right for a nanosecond to make millions or change the world. So when I created the first auction, I never imagined it morphing into eBay. When I sat down with Reid Hoffman and LinkedIn, I never imagined it to change the way we work. And so many of these innovations I've been involved in are very simple principles. An entrepreneur doesn't sell things. I'll repeat it. It's not, I buy an apple for $2 and I sell it for $4. An entrepreneur solves a problem. If you solve a problem for 5 people, you have friends. Solve for 1 million, you're wealthy. Solve for 1 billion, you change history. That's what's exciting here. And if you think this is crazy, every 48 hours, there's a new self-made billionaire. Think about it. What did you do this past weekend? Bet you didn't make 1 billion. So how do you do it? And so the reason I agreed to do this is I have a book coming out in March called Future Proofing You. And the genesis of that was Disrupt You has changed millions of lives. I've heard from millions of people. But occasionally I hear from a millennial or a Gen Xer that says, this is all motivational, but I could never do it. So I took a young boy, a young man, who grew up on welfare, lived in council housing in the UK, and I mentored him 1 day a week for a year. I didn't give him any money, I didn't introduce him to anybody, and I didn't tell him what business to start. And 11 months later, he was a self-made billionaire. So I wanted to break it down. The book, Future Proofing You, breaks it down to 12 truths. You follow these 12 truths, you can't do it. The first month, and it's funny, his name is Vin. Vin sat down after we first met and I told him what I wanted to do. And he basically thought I was totally full of it. He didn't tell me that because he had no other option. He wanted to try. And 6 months later, he showed me the letter from the first night. He wrote himself a letter and said, I'll give this a shot. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's old, he's whatever. But in the first month, when he made $70,000, there was no looking back. He believed in himself. And that's what it really comes down to. So as a dyslexic, my teachers told me I was stupid. Society told me I was stupid. They're wrong. The people that tell you that you can't do it are only telling you one thing. You can't do it with them. So move on. And your parents and teachers that want to discourage you, go get a safe job, that's people that gave up on their dreams because they couldn't do it, trying to protect you from failing. Well, the most important thing you can do is fail. There's a difference between failing and failure. Failing is learning what doesn't work. When you were a little kid, or go watch a little kid, they don't come out of the womb and go, I'm going to walk. They try, they fall down, they get up, they fall down, they get up, and eventually they walk. Most successful entrepreneurs didn't hit it rich on their first time out. Venture capitalists would rather invest in an entrepreneur that's failed because they've learned things. So you either win or you learn. And that's what it's all about. And so at this stage, you can do anything you want. Everybody else built the infrastructure for you. You don't have to know how a phone works to be connected to all these people. You don't have to build a social network. They all exist. You don't have to figure out how to build Google. You literally don't have to figure out anything except how to solve a problem. And here's the advantage that today's students have. As we get older, we develop habits. I call it calcifying. We start turning into stone. We don't change. You don't have these habits. So a technology that's brand new to us is just part of your normal life. When my son wanted to get his first apartment, we drove around and I saw a sign and go, write that down. He took out his phone, he took a picture. Yes, I know my phone takes pictures, but I have a habit of not using it that way. So you're looking at these new tools and you're seeing things that old people didn't figure out. Now you just connect the dots. There was a 17-year-old girl I write about in my book that tweeted to Richard Branson. 3 weeks later, he gave her $1 million and she built a big business. I teach a course, how to build a high-tech startup. My first semester, I had 2 students that did $150 million. And it's like, should they drop out of school? Yeah, I kind of think they should drop out of school. Now, the deans might not be happy with that, but I'm not here for the deans. I'm here to do this. And the reason is I'm paying it forward. So many people helped me along the way. I did some bold, crazy things because you have nothing to lose. I reached out and wrote to the richest man in the world, Bill Gates. I didn't know him. I didn't know anybody that knew him, but I had an idea that I thought would help. And he responded, you don't get anything if you don't try. So it's that easy. So yes, I'm old. Yes, I have a beard, but I'm still emotionally about 15. I haven't grown up.
This is so powerful, the things that you've just said in the last 4 or 5 minutes. Super powerful. I've read your book halfway through. I just got it last week, and I'm reading 2 chapters a day. I've finished already 7 chapters, and it flows very well. And it's kind of stories, the stories that you've just now told us, and created a curiosity in me. One thing I want to know, who is that billionaire? And the second thing I want to know, how do you teach the being insightful, and how do you teach perseverance, especially to the young people?
So insights I can teach. So I have an exercise in the book where I ask you to write down 3 problems. If all that an entrepreneur does is solve problems, what are 3 problems in your life? And I want you to write down 3 problems every day for a month. Sounds easy. The first day you go, I'm in traffic, whatever. But by day 2 or 3, it's hard to find the problems because we've gotten used to our life the way it is. So there were 3 kids in Tel Aviv that were stuck in traffic, and it dawned on them. The phone company knows where their phone is. If you could tell this phone to go left and that one to go right, there'd be no more traffic. That was Waze. They became billionaires the first year. It's that easy. Perseverance is don't stop. And when you start feeling like, oh, this isn't working, look over your shoulder and look at how far you've come, what you've already accomplished, how much closer you are to the goal. You don't have to know all the steps to start your journey. You just have to have that goal. And the difference between a dream and a goal is a deadline. Now, you may have to pivot, you may have to change. Some of the most successful businesses that you use weren't what they set out to do. But because they didn't give up, they discovered things. And the great thing about doing anything in technology is data doesn't lie. It doesn't have an ego. It will tell you what's working, what's not. So there were, about 10 years ago, when broadband and fast video was coming on, 3 guys had this great idea. Everybody was already doing online dating before swiping. There was a world where you went on a website and you saw a picture and you go, okay, I'll email that person. And they said, wait a second, we're going to put video on the dating sites. We are going to make so much money because you can see their personality, their voice, their accent, whatever. So it was called Tune In Hookup. And they were convinced they're going to make so much money. And the first video that got posted was a guy standing in front of the elephant at the zoo, because that is the sexy place to meet the ladies. And what happened is there was a flaw in their thinking. No one wanted to date these losers. I mean, they got the worst videos. But they looked at the data, and the data told them something they didn't know. People were so outraged at how bad these videos were that they shared them with their friends to say, this is what's out there to date. So they changed the name of Tune In Hookup to YouTube.
Wow.
And became billionaires without making $1 in revenue. It's that easy. Twitter was a music site, and so on and so on and so on.
Yeah, these stories, I didn't know about them, although I watched the YouTube first ever video of the guy in the zoo, but I didn't know this story, that it was actually made for a dating site. That's interesting. So your book, you talk about the self-disruption. So first of all, I want to know what is different between innovation and disruption, and how do you disrupt yourself?
Okay. So my classic example of the difference between innovation and disruption. Primitive man figured out in the Bronze Age, how to make metal, and he made a little knife. And then the next innovation was make the knife longer, and it's a sword, and it gets bigger and bigger. And you fast forward to that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark where Indiana Jones is in the streets of Cairo, and there's the big Arab with the scimitar, and it's going like this. And Indiana Jones pulls out a Smith & Wesson and pops him. That's disruption. The second the gun was invented, Making a better sword went out of, there were people that made the most comfortable saddles for riding a horse that you could imagine. They were craftsmen. When Henry Ford made a car, no one really cared about a better saddle. So disruption is something that fundamentally changes the business forever. And that's why you see startups done by kids in their 20s disrupting 100-year-old companies overnight. Because the bigger the company is, the more they're set of doing the same thing and looking at the same competitors. So self-disruption is looking inside you. Everybody thinks of changing the world, but nobody thinks of changing themselves. And if you can change that voice in your head, the voice that says, I'm not good at math, I can't do this, I can't do that. Once you realize that you're malleable, that you can literally rewire your brain, your physiology can change. And I can put you the science in it, but trust me. Once you can change you, changing everything else is easy. And so that's where it starts. That's why it starts with self-disruption. And I walk people through. And so for anybody watching this right now, I have a free 40-page workbook so you can start changing your life right now. And you go to my website, jaysamit.com, jaysamit.com, and you can download it. We'll send it to you. I'm not here to sell anything. I'm here to pay it forward. I like democracy. And you only have democracies if you have a steady middle class. And you only have a middle class if there's entrepreneurs creating jobs. So that's what this is really about. Keeping a nice free society. And nothing is easier and more rewarding. I mean, Richard Branson, when he got out of school, his headmaster said to him, you're either going to be really successful or end up in prison. So, also a dyslexic. And he started businesses in all kinds of fields that he knew nothing about. That's why he called it Virgin. And yet he's made billion-dollar companies again and again. Why? Because he looks for those insights. And they're all around you in that 30 days. So at the end of your 30 days, you'll have 90 problems. You'll have 90 ideas. That's more deal flow than the most famous venture capitalists will get in a month. And then sort them along two things. What affects the most people, right? And what are you passionate about? Because it's not going to be easy. I'm not lying to you like you go to bed and it just happens. It takes work. But it takes the same amount of work to waste your life going day after day to a job that you hate. Ever realize that your boss pays you just enough to get you to show up, but not enough to care? And so today you trade a day of your life, a week of your life, but one day you're going to wake up and realize you traded your whole life. Go talk to your grandparents and ask them this one question. What's their biggest regret? And I guarantee you, it's not something that they failed at. It's something that they failed to try. If only I'd done this, I could have been that. Do it now. You've got nothing to lose. You end up right back where you start, but you end up with more knowledge. And so there's different skills that you have to pick up right now while you're still in school that'll set you on the path to have success and happiness.
But that's the problem, right? In these schools, you are taught to be successful. I've not met yet anybody who was told to become a disruptor, right? So how do we teach the children that how your success should be defined in alignment with disruption?
A teacher once asked John Lennon when he was a child, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he says, happy. And the teacher said, I don't think you understand the question. And he said, I don't think you understand life. So success is different for different people. It's what brings you joy and happiness. Okay, success isn't just, I know lots of miserable millionaires. I know miserable billionaires. I know it's hard to imagine, but there are people that make their own misery. But if you're doing something that you believe in, if you're being fulfilled, if you're able to express yourself, that should be your happiness. And I live by what I preach. Fun story. So I've now been locked in my house for 218 days from this pandemic. I'm on the wrong side of 50. I'm asthmatic. I go out there and catch COVID. I die. But I wanted to show people this isn't a negative, because every day can be better, and you have the power to make it so. So I said, I'm going to look at this as a gift of time. In a typical year, I fly around 100,000 miles or more every year. In January, before I got locked in, I was in 4 continents and 12 countries. That's my life for decades. But now I'm going to be locked in. I didn't know for how long. So I committed that I would paint a painting a day. I love doing watercolors. And I started posting them just to show people not my art, but what you could do if you look at it as a gift of time. Accomplish something with this time. And by putting it out there, I heard from an art agent in Africa and a gallerist in Europe and a gallery in New York. And right now, as I sit here, I have a solo show in New York of my artwork. Mind blown. I'm now a professional artist. Why? Because I didn't stop. And that's all it takes. When I was very young, about 19, a man gave me wonderful advice. Be the best at what you do, or the only one doing it. If you're the only one doing it, by definition, you're the best. So I hate competition. So does Silicon Valley. That's why you see them give tons of money to one startup. Uber, boom, who's going to compete with it? eBay, who's going to compete with it? Facebook, who's going to compete with it? So you can go into a field that has lots of people doing it, and they've been doing it longer, and they know more people, and they're more experienced, or go somewhere where there's no competition. I've always been the best at everything that I'm doing because nobody else is doing it. When it gets all crowded, that's when I sell my company and move on. And I've sold companies for hundreds of millions of dollars. I've taken companies public. I've merged companies. But I hate competition.
Did you write your second book also during the lockdown?
So I also wrote my second book during the lockdown, and it's amazing how much time you have when you literally never leave the house. I haven't been out to get food. I went to a doctor. That was it. And trying to walk around the neighborhood is like the old video game Frogger. Oh, there's people on this side of the road. I got to go that side of the road. It's ridiculous. So we're all in this. But I've watched other people do the same thing. I have a friend who's very well known in the community of dentists around the world. And he realized dentists have the most dangerous job because they're in somebody's mouth that's breathing right on them. So he made a special mask for dentists and whatever, had it manufactured. And that's what he did during this time. And the thing will sell millions and millions of dollars because he saw a problem. And that's all it takes. And if your problem's big enough, it becomes like a light that attracts moths. And you'll find this great team of other people that want to do it and investors that want to solve it. I'm chairman of a company that's doing that. As crazy as it sounds for those of you that know nothing about agriculture, the way we grow food is we put tons of poison on the soil and then we eat what comes out. And the poisons kill all the bugs and the weeds, and we hope they don't kill us, but it turns out they give us cancer, and they do. So could we get rid of this? And yes, but the problem is the weeds grow faster. So how do you get rid of weeds without chemicals? So I was looking, I live in California where we have fires, and they have herds of goats that you can rent in modern LA that go up and eat all the grass. I said, why don't we do a herd of robots that goes through the cornfields and the sorghum and the soy and the cotton and just take care of the weeds? And so Greenfield Robotics was born, and we're doing it. So not only does it make healthier food, there's no more runoff down the rivers in the U.S. We have the Mississippi goes in the Gulf of Mexico. There's no fish in the Gulf of Mexico because all those pesticides and herbicides go down there and they killed all the fish. So we'll make our rivers cleaner, we'll make our soil cleaner, we'll make what we eat more nutritious. Everybody wins. So I didn't want to be chairman of another company. I'm lazy, I'm old, I don't want to work, I don't have to work. But it was too big of a problem not to deal with it. And if me being associated helped, then sign me up.
That is so interesting. I mean, every story that you talk about in your book and even now, they're mind-blowing, really. And by the way, I had actually seen your paintings. They look like like renowned professional painter has done it. They're all over on Twitter. Amazing work. That's great. And I also know that you're a magician too, aren't you?
My way through college, and my hobby since I was a kid was doing magic, and didn't have the guts to pursue it as a career, but still perform and enjoy it.
In your book, you talk about just to become a disruptor, you have to start with introspection. I just wanted to learn a few stories about that and how does that work?
So you already know what's not working in your life. You maybe complain about it, but you're not doing anything about it. So what are those things that you wish you could change? Physical's the easiest, right? So walk 2 more steps today, walk 10 more steps, eat 1 less French fry, But same goes on with skills. That in 2nd or 3rd grade, when you were 7 years old, you messed up a multiplication problem and you didn't know 7 times 7. So you convince yourself you're bad at math. If I put you in 2nd grade up against 2nd graders now, I bet you could beat them all at math. So we get this drilled into our heads. And there's a study that they did in Canada. Canada, their sport is hockey. And it turns out all the great hockey players for the past century were all born in the same 3 months. Is it astrology? Is it the moon? How could this be? And what it was is it was the cutoff for going into the next year of their school system, which means when you went to school, you were bigger than the other kids by a year, which means the first time you played hockey, you were bigger and stronger and more coordinated, so you were good at it. But more importantly, the coaches said you were good at it, and the teachers told you were good at it. So, and your parents told you were good at it. So you kept doing it, which if you keep doing it, you get better at it, and you become a great hockey player. The reverse is true. If people are telling you you're stupid, that you can't do it, you'll start believing it, and you'll have those results. So introspection is what's holding you back? What's that voice in your head, and how do you change that? And I'll give you a trick. So drugs, illegal drugs, people take them because it releases serotonin and norepinephrine. It lights up your synaptic nerves and gets everybody all happy and euphoric. Well, guess what? You can do the same thing. Tomorrow when you wake up, and do this every day, I still do it. Look in the mirror and say, today can be better than yesterday, and I have the power to make it so. And just by being in a positive mindset, and there's tons of studies on this, I'm not some tree-hugging hippie, you'll see more opportunity, you'll be more popular, you'll get more dates, you'll make more friends, you'll make more sales, you'll make more money, because you'll see opportunity. But if you walk around, oh, such problems, you wouldn't see it if it was right in front of your face. So it starts with you. And no one can change you. People can beat the living daylights out of you, and you're not going to change. And that's why when you look in the US, 300 million people, but almost a third of our CEOs are immigrants or the son of immigrants. Why? Because somebody that immigrates made a conscious choice for a better life. They have that positive mindset, okay? They're not like, oh, it's probably bad over there. Why go? I'll stay here. I can suffer here. Why suffer? They have that. And I think what differentiated America, it was made up by a bunch of people that wanted something different and better. And so that culture that we have, which is very different than the British, is we have no fear of failure. Look at the idiot we have in the White House. He fails and fails and fails, bankrupt I don't know how many times, and now he's president. But if you think of The Simpsons, that's the American culture. Homer comes up with a get-rich-quick idea, it falls apart, and then life goes on. Where in the British, it's, I'll be embarrassed, what will people say? You know what? I've yet to meet a hater that's doing better than me. Think about it. The youngest self-made billionaire right now is Kyle Kardashian. To hit $1 billion at 21, you go, oh, well, she came from that family. Really? Kim's not a billionaire. Mom's not a billionaire. None of the older sisters are billionaire. What did she do differently? She came along at the generation of Instagram, understood its power, and started marketing as opposed to being paid to be a model for a cosmetic line. Just sell her own stuff. Here's a little secret to all the women listening. There's only 2 factories in the world to make lipsticks and cosmetics. One's in the US and one's in Italy. All the rest are just labels slapped on. So she slapped on her own and made $1 billion. It is that easy.
So I think it comes back to, you previously mentioned Henry Ford. If you think you can, or if you think you can't, either way you're right.
If you think you can't, you're right.
And that reminds me to a story I was reading actually a couple of days ago. There was a student in the classroom and he actually sleeps during the lecture, and the class teacher writes something on the board, and class teacher tells the class that this is the problem and it is so difficult that even I can't solve it. I'm just sharing it with you. So all the class students saw it and they said, okay, if the teacher can't do it, we can't do it. But when the class got over, everybody went out and this guy was sleeping. He woke up and he saw on the board and he thought, oh, that's the homework for tomorrow, right? So he just wrote it down and he went back home. The next day he comes with a solution to that problem and he gives it to the teacher because he thought that it's a homework everybody has to do and we should be able to do it. And he was able to do.
Something happened with breaking the 4-minute mile. Doctors 100 years ago said it couldn't be done. The body would fall apart. The engineering can't be done. Blah, blah. And people tried for years and years. There's a whole book on this. And one day a guy finally broke it. That's not the amazing part. The next year, 3 people broke it. The next year, 18 people broke it. 100 years, nobody could do it. But once you knew that it could be done, everybody could do it. So it's that mindset. And that power of positive thinking is undeniably the strongest superpower you have. Now, here's the course that I went from high school to life that, what I distilled. In high school, we had a wonderful speech teacher, and probably the most important skill you can master at this stage of your life is communicating. There are no one-person companies. So you're going to have to be able to communicate to get people to follow your dream, to invest in you, to work with you, to hire you, to be your clients, to buy your product. So really learn how to communicate, learn how to speak. And nowadays there's endless videos. So instead of watching a cat play the piano on YouTube, find things, watch great TED Talks, really analyze what are they doing, how are they using their hands, how are they communicating. Then the next thing you have to learn how to do is write. I couldn't write. I was dyslexic, and I stumbled in this by accident. My grandfather, when I got into college, my grandparents didn't go to college, said, would you do me one favor? I said, sure, I love my grandfather. Would you write a story for the school paper and send it to me? I go, sure. So I went in, I auditioned to be a writer for the paper, wrote my thing, and the person said, you can't write, this is horrible, this is the worst thing ever. And nothing gets Jay going like telling me I can't. So I stuck at it. By the time I graduated college, I'd written over 300 stories, more stories than anybody had ever written for our paper, won national awards, and I learned how to write. I didn't learn how to write from teachers. If there is a local paper, great way. The reason is because writers have to write with a deadline. It goes to print in a few hours, it's going to be posted, you got to get it. You got to get the who, what, where. You got to really synthesize a lot down to a little. And that helps you write emails and business proposals and PowerPoints and everything else. And then the last skill, which really took the longest and is much easier today, is how do you network? How do you find a mentor? And so in the new book, I really explain how to go about finding not a mentor, but a series of mentors for every stage of your life. No one got there on their own. I was part of that myth machine, EMI, 100-year-old music company I was president of. And when you would see your favorite musician, your favorite rock star up on Wembley, 100,000 people in the stands, oh my God, he did it on his own, look at him. Not that there was a hairstylist and a makeup artist and a manager and a roadie and 9 people that wrote the song and 12 people that edited it and a whole team that marketed it. And I remember, I won't out the person, but somebody that goes on stage with a real ratty looking shirt, and the wardrobe person came with them on a hanger, all steamed and everything to look ratty. So it takes hundreds and hundreds of people to make it look like it's just that one person talking right to your heart. So how do you find those mentors? And you know what? LinkedIn, and it's all in the new book, how to really use LinkedIn. Because guess what? People want to feel validated. They want to feel that their knowledge can help others. So people are absolutely want to help you. You have to learn how to communicate. You don't email, hey, will you be my mentor? That's not how it works. So in Future Proofing You, I really outline it. In Disrupt You, talk about language. The only thing that's in here that I didn't create was I looked at analysis of what words get noticed more in resumes. And why aren't these the words that you're using? Again, everything's data. And another fun story from Disrupt You, there was a young man who got a job at one of the big multinational ad agencies. Loves advertising. Oh, I'm going to write cool ads. No, that's not what your job is. You're sitting in a cube filling out graphs. He wanted to shoot himself. He hated his job. But he looked on Google and he realized nobody had bought as keywords the names of the 5 biggest creative directors in the world. So he spent £8, bought them. And when these people Google themselves, because when you're famous, you Google yourself and get somebody saying trash about you, he said, hey, I'd really like to work for you. Here's a link to my portfolio. 3 of the 5 most powerful men in advertising called him in for interviews and all offered him a job. He advanced his career 20 years and, made 10 times what he was making before spending that £8. So he could have gotten a mocha latte, frappuccino, espresso, pumpkin spice, or he could change his life. So it's about priorities. Elon Musk, before he became the billionaire that you know him, he was an immigrant kid to the US. He knew he wanted to start a company. He knew it would be hard, but he wanted to prove to himself that he could do it. And Elon, if he sets his mind, he does it. So he says, I'm going to prove that I can make it. I'm going to live on $1 a day for a month. So he used oranges, a lot of ramen noodles, and he did it. And once he did that, he didn't have a fear of being broke. And look at him today. And during the pandemic, he's doubled his net worth.
In the story that you just mentioned about writing, and we're talking about the fear and how Elon killed his fear, and how people in here have fear of what other people will say about them. So I just want to know, how do you seek strength in your vulnerabilities? Because we all have this, especially in here, the fear of others' opinion is really high on the list. So yeah, how you can
Future Proofing You, one of the 12 truths is a whole truth and chapter about fear. We all have them, right? So the way that you have to do is you have to reprioritize your fear. Okay? If I go apply for that job, I'll get rejected, I hate rejection. I'm afraid I'll be embarrassed. Everybody will know that I tried and I didn't go. Okay, legitimate fear. If you don't work, you will starve and die. That's a bigger fear. So reprioritize the fear, but now let's switch it around. Fear is your friend. Fear is a tool, a powerful tool. Because guess what? Everybody you're dealing with in business is also afraid. They're afraid of losing their job. They're afraid of failing. They're afraid. So how do you turn that around? So I had a digital ad agency a few years ago. And believe it or not, a decade ago, no presidential campaigns were advertising on the internet. This was mind-blowing to me. Well, presidential candidates are old. The guys running campaigns are even older. And TV, some radio, some billboards, but nobody knew about the internet. So I decided I was going to go after that $2 billion that they spend. And so I made appointments to get to see the campaign managers. And I let each one know that I was going after them to the other campaign managers. And so now they had a fear. If they didn't do it and the other campaigns do, they'll never get hired again. They'll look stupid. And by going to each one and each one thinking the others must have hired me, I ended up being hired by all of them. And each one said, well, if I hire you, you can't work for anybody else. And I said, well, you don't do that with ABC or CNN when you buy an ad, so you're not doing it with me. And I ended up with 4 presidential candidates all hiring me because I leveraged their fear. And so I break down the 3 fears that people have that you can leverage for your success. And I realized I didn't cover that in Disrupt You, and so I really dig deep in it. And Vin Clancy, the young man that I mentored, that's how he made his big success. He figured out and zeroed in on a fear that wasn't being addressed at that moment in time. And that's the easiest thing to go after.
And now I'm thinking about the disruption that the COVID has done to everybody's life and put everybody into a fearful state for such a longer duration. How do you find and how do you identify disruptive ideas or industries or businesses today?
Every problem is an opportunity in disguise. The bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity. So, COVID changed lots of stuff. And entrepreneurs jumped in. Wow, restaurants want a social distance. I'll make plexiglass and sell them to the restaurants. Nail salons want a social distance. I'll make a piece of plexiglass that you just put your hands through. As I said, my dentist friend made something for the dental community. People are now going to be working from home. What do they need at home that they didn't have before? Food delivery suddenly becomes part of the thing. I worked with him years ago, the same entrepreneur, Travis, that created Uber, realized that everybody was ordering food, right? And what the food delivery guys would go is go to McDonald's and then bring it to you, and go to the pizza place and bring it to that person, and they're driving all over. So he came up with the brilliant idea of what are called ghost kitchens. Why not just have one kitchen that's licensed and allowed to make Burger King, McDonald's, Pizza Hut, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and everything else? Now you've cut out all the driving. You've cut out the margin of the franchisee owner. And then another entrepreneur took it one step further. Said, wait a second. Why don't we create some new restaurant brands that don't exist? So a Thai food brand that's only available through an Uber Eats or a Mexican or whatever it might be. So now you're able to test new menus and new restaurants without having to build them and find a location and hire staff. So all these innovations that just came out of COVID. So what did COVID change? What did it change in your life, your family life? That's back to those 30 problems. Now, a lot of what COVID actually did was it didn't change anything. It accelerated things that were already happening. Telecommuting and working from home has been tried since the 1970s. Yes, I'm that old. But back then, when everything was physical and there's no internet, somebody had to drive over different forms and send that, Then, now that we're all electronic, why do you have to go to an office? Your biggest banks, your biggest tech companies have all said, you know what? After COVID, you don't have to show up at the office at Twitter anymore. You don't have to show up at Microsoft. Why do you leave your home and your computer at home to lose 2 hours to go to another computer to do the same thing you could have done at home? So what are the tools that they now need? What are things that people want to do to spend to make their office nicer in their environment? And it turns out, and I talk about this is a whole chapter in the new book, that actually this is a huge competitive advantage. Because now that people accept virtual companies, you're not limited to the talent that lives a mile from you or 5 miles from you. Maybe the best graphic artist is somewhere around the world and willing to work for $5 a day as opposed to 15 pounds, an hour. So you can create virtual things. And 99 Designs was a great example of this. If you want a logo, you put up how much you want to spend, and tons of artists that have free time that said, yeah, I'd like to make $500 or $300 or $1,000. The more you offer, the better. And whenever I do this, after I choose one, I always ask the person where they are and what's their day job. And I'm hiring people from the biggest ad agencies around the world that are doing this and moonlighting to make an extra $1,000. So I'm getting millions of dollars worth of talent right at that disposal. And I have yet to hire somebody that speaks the same language or lives in the same country as me. Not because I'm trying to, but because the work speaks for itself. There's no bias, there's no racism, there's no sexism, there's no anyism. Well, if you can do that with logos, what else can you do that with? You can do that with editing. You can do that with making a TV spot. You can do it with almost anything. And so virtual companies is such an advantage for young people starting their companies. You don't need to rent a place. You don't need to buy equipment. That already exists.
So I think this is the best time to pivot your energies, as you talk in one of the chapter in the book, isn't it?
You have nothing but time.
Nothing
So
but
you could
time.
be watching stupid things on television, not getting you anywhere.
Mm.
You know what? Ever wonder why Tesla never made a TV commercial? And yet your average General Motors car, $1,500 of the price is to pay back for the advertising. Well, the reason why you don't see Lamborghini or Maserati or Tesla advertising on television is the people that can afford those cars, we don't watch television. We're too busy creating and doing things. When my kids were young, I had a company that made video games. I love making video games. But my kids wanted a video game system. I said, no. I said, you want to play video games? Make them yourself. So they both learned to code. And once I learned to code, doing the Twitch stuff was boring.
I think in one of the chapter I was reading last night, you talk about the disruptors map, right? And then you say, pack your disruptor suitcase. Now, my question to that is, what you should keep in your disruptor suitcase, and more importantly, what you should not keep in that.
So I live in a fire zone. California burns down. And you learn really quick between earthquakes and fires. It's the greatest place in the world to live, but we have those two problems. You have a suitcase packed, ready to run out at a moment's notice with just those things that you physically need. So in a real world suitcase, that could be medicines and shoes and clothes and a flashlight, and you get it. On your career, what do you need to get you forward? What don't you have that you need to put in there? What work do you need to do? And here's the other stuff. Everything that you carry on your back weighs you down. So all those problems and troubles, you have to let things just roll off your back. Because if they roll off your back, they're not slowing you down and carrying you. And yes, you had problems. Yes, you had failures. Yes, you wish you would have done things differently. But that day already happened. Every day now that you waste thinking about it is one day less that you have to work on a solution, to work on a new thing. So move forward. So the idea of a disrupt your suitcase is, okay, I need this, and this experience. I don't have those yet. Okay, let me figure out how to go get it. Let me get an internship and work for free. I mean, some of the most successful people, me included, I mean, we took internships because we wanted to learn how things worked. Howard Hughes was one of the first multi-billionaires a century ago, and he disappeared for 2 weeks. Nobody knew where he was. He made up a fake name, and he got a job as a flight attendant on an airline because he wanted to understand how an airline works. And then when he got back, he started Hughes Airlines and, created another multi-billion-dollar business. It's that easy.
But more importantly, what you should avoid carrying, the baggage and stuff.
Don't carry the expectations of others.
Mm.
It's your life. You got one life. If you believe in more lives, you got to take your time. I don't. I want to enjoy this one. I want to make a difference. The purpose of life is to live a life of purpose. What is your purpose? I hate when people ask kids, when do you want to be when you grow up? What you should be asking is, what problem do you want to solve? This world's got a lot of problems, and you've got a lot of brains. It doesn't have to be the giant, global warming, climate change, food, What's a little problem in your neighborhood? What's a problem in your life? I have a dear friend, Tom Bilyeu. He had a tech company. Wasn't happy. It was boring. He was making money. But he had relatives that were severely obese. And he wanted to solve that problem. And he looked at the protein bars, and there were over 1,000 protein bars for sale. And he realized they were really just glorified candy bars. A lot of corn syrup, a lot of sugar, a lot of wasted stuff. So they decided to make their own Quest bar, sold the company for $1 billion because they were passionate. They didn't look at all that as competition. They go, no, there's not a single company making a healthy protein bar. And we have faith in consumers that they'll read the ingredients and say, this one's real. So what's a problem? What's your purpose? Life goes by really, really fast. It's impossible to explain that to young people. I wouldn't have believed it either. You know, I look around and, you know, how I became a grandpa and how I'm old, I don't know. But for most of my career, I was the young guy with the new idea that nobody listened to. And it took me years to learn that my biggest mistake was I would leave meetings. Why don't they get it? Why don't they understand? Why don't they see the future? Because it's not their job to. They got to where they want to be. Their job is just to stay there. Your job is to convince them and pull them and show them how the future can benefit them. And that opens all the last doors to your success.
Wow, that's super powerful. And thanks for touching the Tom Bilyeu story, because I'm his super fan. I watch all his interviews. He's now a very super successful YouTuber after selling Quest. Yeah, so thanks a lot. And I watched your interview with Tom. It was really...
Yeah, he's a great interviewer. He's built up an amazing impact theory. Amazing. If you want motivation, motivation's like showers. You need them often to keep going. So go to meetups, find other starters, find other startups. And one or two things will happen if you hang out with other entrepreneurs. One, you'll learn things to make your business better. Or two, you'll see somebody that has a better idea that you believe in, and they need a team, and you'll hop on their bandwagon and off you go.
Okay, thanks, Jay. Actually, I do have many questions, but in the interest of time, I would ask you one question, which I ask all my guests, which is, what are the top 3 skills? I might have touched upon them in the interview already, but again, what are the top 3 skills that you believe that the young people and the students or everybody who needs in order to grow?
So I talked about that you need to learn to communicate verbally. You need to learn how to write. I'd add to that, you need to know how to find information, how to really Google effectively, how to really go past that first page, how to really, get knowledge. And it's not a skill so much as a value. You need to be a person of your word. Honesty and integrity will get you across the finish line. Lying and cheating will make you a quick buck, but it won't last. But every time I've needed to put my hand out for help, people help me because I've always helped them, and I've always been a man of my word, and I'm humbled. When a billionaire writes the intro to your book, why would they do that? They don't need the exposure. They don't need the money. So be a person of your word, have integrity in everything you do, live your life that way, and happiness will come. And the last piece of advice as we end, back to your 90 problems, the real secret to having happiness is solve for others to solve for you. The more people you help, the happier and more successful you will be. I hope this aids you in your journey to success, and I look forward to hearing from you. Follow me on social media, and I hope I can help.
Wow. Thank you very much, Jay. That is so inspiring. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this interview. Like so many stories which I will remember really, really. I mean, and you have worked with most of the stories that you have told. You have touched upon those, like LinkedIn founder, you worked with them, Richard Branson, Bill Gates. I mean, if I would speak everything about you in your intro, then my whole 1 hour will go in just giving the intro. Such a great things you have achieved. So
Everybody, if you want to know more about the work that Jay is doing, please do visit his website, jaysamit.com. I am so looking forward to his new book, which is the Future Proofing. I've already read half the Disruptive, which is an amazing read. It is full of stories. It wouldn't look like a business book. It's a fiction book, and it's a lot of interesting facts in it. So please do check it. And jaysamit.com is his website. I'll put all the links in the description below. And if you have not yet done so, then please do consider subscribing to this channel. I will see you again next week. Till then, goodbye.